Hi guys, welcome to week 5 of our virtual online classes, and we got another mythology class for you today. So last week we heard a few fun stories. We heard about Glooscap and some men traveling to find him to get their heart's desire. And we also, is that the only one we read? I think we read 2. Yeah, that sounds right. Oh, and we also read the story about the boy who was adopted by the mother bear. So that was a good story too. So before we get started, if you have access to paper or pencils, something to draw with, grab those. And we'll just jump right in. We've got another Glooscap story, and this one sounds like it's going to be kind of similar to the last one we read, because it's of other men who went to Glooscap for gifts. So I guess we're going to hear about some other men who went on the journey to find Glooscap to get what they wanted. And again, just as a reminder, if you've forgotten, we're in the Micmac tribe's legends right now. They're from the Nova Scotia area, so that's where's about in the world we are. All right, let's see, this one has a weird intro. Okay, now there went forth many men unto Glooscap, hearing that they could win the desires of their hearts, and all got what they asked for in any case. But as for having what they wanted, that depended on the wisdom with which they wished or acted. So that's kind of a cool beginning. It's saying that everyone who finds Glooscap gets what they ask for, but whether they get what they wanted, that's up to whether they were wise enough to know what it was they actually wanted. So that's kind of a cool little thing to think about there. The good Glooscap liked it not that when he had told anyone evenly and plainly what to do, that man should then act otherwise or double with him. And it came to pass that a certain fool of the kind who can do nothing unless it be in his own way made a long journey to the master, and his trials were indeed many. For he came to an exceeding high mountain in a dark and lonely land, where he heard no sound. And the ascent thereof was like a smooth pole, and the descent on the other side far worse, for it hung over the bottom. Yet it was worse beyond, for there the road lay between the heads of 2 huge serpents, almost touching each other, who darted their terrible tongues at those who went between. And yet again the path passed under the wall of death. Now this wall hung like an awful cloud over a plain, rising and falling at times, yet no man knew when. And when it fell, it struck the ground, and that so as to crush all that was beneath it. Okay, so this guy is on a journey to find Glooscap, and the road is pretty treacherous, pretty dangerous. So there's a place that has no sound, so he's traveling to this land that has no sound, and then he's going like up a big cliff or something, and then as he's coming down it overhangs and it's hard to get down, and it's like a smooth pole and there's nothing to grab onto, and then he has to go on this road that has 2 giant snakes that dart their tongues out, and then also he has to pass under the wall of death, which is this big scary cloud thing that hangs over, and you never know when it's going to drop down, but when it drops down on you, it crushes everything. So, kind of a scary journey he's on. But the young man escaped all these trials, and came to the island of the great master. And when he had dwelt there a certain time, and was asked what he would have, he replied, "If my lord will, let him give me a medicine which will cure all disease." More than this he asked not. So the master gave him a certain small package, and said, "Herein is that which thou seekest, but I charge thee that thou lettest not thine eyes behold it until thou shalt reach thy home." So he thanked the master and left. Okay, let's talk here. If you've done this class before, you know that when they tell them not to do something, they always do that thing. So he's been told, he asked for a medicine that would cure everything, and he was given it, but he was told, don't look at it until you get home. I have a feeling he's going to look at it. What do you guys think? But he was not far away ere he desired to open the package and test the medicine, and yet more the truth of the master. These people never listen. And he said to himself, Truly, if this be but a deceit, it was shrewdly devised to bid me not open it till I returned. For he knew well that once so far I would make no second journey to him. If the medicine avail aught, it cannot change in aught. So he opened it, when that which was therein fell to the ground, and spread itself like water everywhere, and then dried away like a mist. And when he returned and told his tale, men mocked him. Okay, so that guy goes through this dangerous journey, gets there, asks what he wants, gets it, is told, don't look at it till you get home, almost immediately looks at it, loses it, goes home, tells people what he got, and they all laugh at him. So that's the first guy that sought out Glooscap to get his desire. All right. Then again, there were 3 brothers who, having adventured, made known their wishes. Now the first was very tall, far above all his fellows, and vain of his comeliness. For he was of those who put bark or fur into their moccasins, that they may be looked up to by the little folk, and be loved by the little squaws. And his hair was plastered to stand up on high, and on the summit of it was a very long turkey tail feather. And this man asked to become taller than any Indian in all the land. And the second wished that he might ever remain where he was, to behold the land and the beauty of it, and to do naught else. And the third wished to live to an exceeding old age, and ever to be good in health. Okay, so we've got these 3 new guys who are going to travel to Glooscap to see if they can get their desires. Everybody knows their desires. I guess they don't make that a secret. The first one wants to be taller than everybody else forever. The second one wants to always stay where he is so he can look at the beauty of the land and do nothing else. And the third one wants to grow to be really old and be in good health. Now the 3, when they came to the island, had found their 3 wigwams, and in 2 of these were dwellers, not spoken of in other traditions. In one lived Kulpujat, a very strange man, for he has no bones and cannot move himself. But every spring and autumn he is rolled over with handspikes by the order of Glooscap, and this is what his name means in the Micmac tongue. Okay, so they get there, they find some wigwams, and they find this man who has no bones. So I guess he's just like a saggy bunch of skin and muscles and stuff. Gross. So he can't move around. But every spring and autumn he's rolled over hand spikes, and that's how he gets his name. Okay. And in the autumn he is turned towards the west, but in the spring towards the east. And this is a figure of speech denoting the revolving seasons of the year. With his breath, he can sweep down whole armies, and with his looks alone, he can work great wonders. And all this means the weather: frost, snow, ice, and sunshine. Okay, so this boneless guy who gets rolled on spikes also has some magical powers. He can, with one breath, he can sweep down a whole army, and with his looks, he can work great wonders about frost, snow, ice, and sunshine. Okay, so that's in the first wigwam. In the other wigwam dwelt Kukwu. Wow. Yeah, sure, that's how I'll say it. Kukwu. That's how it's said. Which means earthquake. And this mighty man can pass along under the ground and make all things shake and tremble by his power. So he's the one to blame for all the trouble Utah's been having. Kukwu. Jeez. Now when Glooscap had heard what these visitors wished for, he called Earthquake and bid him take them all 3 and put them with their feet in the ground. And he did so, when they at once became 3 trees, as one tradition declares, pines, and another cedars. Okay, so Glooscap, when he hears what the 3 visitors want, he gets Earthquake and says, okay, have these guys put their feet in the ground, and when they do that, they become trees. So that he that would be tall became exceeding tall, for his head rose above the forest, and even the turkey feather at the top thereof is not forgotten, since to this day it is seen waving in the wind. And he who will listen in a pine wood may hear the tree murmuring all day long in the Indian tongue of the olden time. I'm just going to say the English translation because I'm going to butcher the native translation. So the translation of what the pine wood is murmuring all day long is, "Oh, I am such a great man. Oh, I am such a great man." And the second, who would remain in the land, remains there, for while his roots are in the ground, he cannot depart from it. And the third, who would live long in health, unless men have cut him down, is standing as of yore. The end. Okay, so these three guys, the one wanted to be taller than everyone, the second one wanted to remain where he was so he could look over all of the beauty of the land, and the third wanted to live to be very old and have good health. And all three of them have the same fate. They were all turned into trees. And the one is taller than all the others, taller than all of the men. The second one is staying where he is, able to look at all the beauty. And the third one is living to be very old and healthy unless he's been cut down, because they're all trees. All right, so that is the end of that story. That was kind of a fun one. It was kind of a twofer because we got the story of the first guy who went to get the medicine that would cure everything. Didn't listen because they never do in these stories. And so then he didn't end up having it. And then the other three who wanted those three different things and were turned into a tree and got their desire by being turned into a tree. So it makes sense in that one that at the beginning of the story, they mention that thing that if people get what they want, it's really up to whether they know to ask for what it is they actually desire, how wise they are in phrasing what they ask for. Because these men didn't ask to stay human and have these other things, so they got turned into trees. So that was a fun one. All right, up next, we have of the great works which Glooscap made in the land. So we did a few weeks ago read some creation stories about the different characters. So we'll start reading this. If it seems like it's basically just rehashing stuff we already read, we'll skip it and go on to the next one. But let's take a look at it. Okay. Hold on, just taking a quick look at it. Okay, well, let's read this. Over all the land of the Wabanaki, there is no place which was not marked by the hand of the master. And it is to be seen on hills and rivers and great roads, as well as mighty rocks, which were in their day living monsters. For there is a very wonderful highway from Quesora-Legic to Parsborough, running parallel with the river now called Hebert, and this road is called Uiwukun, the causeway, but by Englishmen it's called the Boar's Back. I don't think we need this information. Let's see. Let's skip this stuff about landmarks we don't know about. Okay. It came to pass in those days that the beavers had built a dam across from Utgogunchik to the opposite shore, and thereby made a pond that filled all the valley of Annapolis. Now in those times the beavers were monstrous beasts, and the master, though kind of heart, seems to have had but little love for them ever since the day when Quabitsis, the son of the great beaver, tempted Malsum to slay his brother. Okay, so that's a story I don't think we've run into yet. So Glooscap doesn't really like beavers. They're huge monsters, I guess, back then. They were really big, a lot bigger than they are now. And Glooscap doesn't really like them because the great beaver tempted someone to slay their own brother, to kill them. So Glooscap doesn't like them because of that. Now the bones of these beavers may be found to this day, and many there are on Unamagik, and their teeth are 6 inches across, and there are no such Quabit today. And these are the remains of the beavers who built the dam at Cape Blomidon and forded the Annapolis Valley. Okay, so they're saying you don't find these giant beavers anymore, but just their teeth were like 6 inches long, which I don't know, like that big, pretty, oh, I guess the closer it is to the camera, it throws off perspective. But 6 inches, that's pretty big for beavers' teeth, because they're a lot smaller than that now. Now, Glooscap would have a hunt and do a deed which should equal the great whale fishing of Kipusiogunau. So he cut the great dam near the shore and bade Martin watch, for he said, I mistrust that there is a little beaver hiding hereabouts. And when the dam was cut from where it joined the shore, there was a mighty rush of many waters, so that it swung round to the westward, yet it did not break away from the other shore. Therefore the end of it lodged with a great split therein when the flood had found a free course. And the whole may be seen there still, even to this day, and may be seen by all those who pass up the bay. And this point, or Cape Split, is called by the Micmacs Pligon, which, being interpreted, means the opening of the beaver dam. Okay, so Glooscap decides that he's going to cut the dam that these giant beavers built, and it makes a split in the big body of water there, in the cape that's there. Then, to frighten the beaver, Glooscap threw at it a few handfuls of earth, and these, falling somewhat to the eastward of Partridge Island, became the 5 islands, and the pond which was left was the basin of Minas. And yet another tradition tells that after cutting the dam, Glooscap sat and watched, but no beaver came out, for Quabit had gone out of a back door. So he took a rock and threw it afar, 150 miles, to scare the beaver back again. But the beaver had gone over the Grand Falls, and the stone remains there even to this day. Okay, so that's the end of that story. I feel like that one would make a lot more sense if I knew more of the geography of that area and like what giant rocks and bodies of water there are, but I don't. So maybe some of you are more familiar with the geography in northeastern America and southeastern Canada, because it sounds like that's what these stories are explaining, why they are the way they are. So that's that one. I liked the last story a little bit more. It was easier to follow, probably because of the geography thing I mentioned. Okay, our next story, and I was laughing about this a few weeks ago, that some of these stories have really long titles. So this one is called Of the Surprising and Singular Adventures of 2 Water Fairies Who Were Also Weasels, and How They Became the Bride of a Star, including the mysterious and wonderful works of Lox, the great Indian devil, who rose from the dead. That's the title. Pretty long. Let me give it to you one more time. Of the surprising and singular adventures of 2 water fairies who were also weasels, and how they each became the bride of a star, including the mysterious and wonderful works of Lox, the great Indian devil who rose from the dead. Okay, so we've got some big promises to live up to in the story. We got to have some water fairies. We got to have, the water fairies being weasels, becoming brides of a star. We also need an Indian devil who comes back from the dead. So we've been promised a lot in this title, so let's hope the story delivers. Wow, this is a pretty long one. Okay, yeah, this one's pretty long, so hopefully we have enough time to get through it today. If we don't, we'll pick up next week with the end of it. Whew. Yeah, okay. Far back in the forest, by a brook, dwelt 2 young men, Avistanuch, the marten, and Team, the moose. Of these, each had a wigwam, and therewith a grandmother who kept house. And a team hunted and worked industriously, but Master Marten was greatly moalet, which signifies one who liveth upon his neighbors, depending on their good nature, even as he that planteth corn and beans depends upon the pleasant smiles of the sun. Whence it came to pass that wherever victuals were in store, there too his presence did greatly abound. Okay, so we have 2 different people. One is called Team, and one it looks like they're going to be calling Master Marten in this story. And Master Marten doesn't work very hard. He kind of relies on the kindness of his neighbors and his friends to get by. Now it happened that one day Team the moose had killed a bear and brought home a single load of the meat, leaving the rest to be looked after anon. And being thrifty, and not caring to feed those who fed him not, neither did they thank, he said unto himself, and also to his grandmother, Truly the eyes of Marten shall not see this thing, his nose shall not smell thereof, neither shall his tongue taste it. So let not the tidings of our good luck go forth from the wigwam. Yes, replied the old woman, and well and wisely thou speakest, my son, but we have this day broken our kettle, while Marten has brought in a new one. Behold, I will go and borrow it, and having cooked in it, I will wash and wipe it, so that there shall be no sign of what we did therewith, and return it. Okay, so Team kills a bear, and he knows that Martin kind of just sponges off of his friends, and so he's told his grandmother, okay, we got to keep this a secret from him because he's going to want some of our meat. And the grandmother says, you know what, you're right, but we broke our kettle, so we don't have something to cook it in, so we're going to have to borrow Martin's kettle, but we'll make sure we wipe it out really well afterwards so he doesn't know that we had good food. Which, I mean, if he's lending his kettle, I don't know. Judge how you will. Now this was done, but he who is Moalet and a haunter of feasts is like a hunter of beasts. He knows well from a small sign where there is a large load, and the borrowing of kettles means the boiling of victuals therein. So having in him somewhat of sorcery, he did but step to his friend's wigwam, and peeping through a crevice, saw a great store of bear's meat. And when the grandmother of Moose came unto him to return the kettle, just as she entered the lodge, there arose from it a savory steam, and looking in it was full of well-cooked food. And Martin thanked her greatly, yet she, being put to shame, fled to her own home. But Moose said it was no matter, so the next day they went to the woods together, and all was well. Okay, so Martin lends his kettle, but he's not stupid. He knows that they're asking for a big cooking kettle, that they probably have a lot of food. And he's seen enough and looked in their hut enough that he knows that they have a lot of meat. Now it befell Martin, as it might have befallen any other man, that one day he came to a distant and lonely lake in the mountains. Yet there, stepping softly as a cat behind the rocks hung with grapevines, he heard laughing and splashing, and a pleasant sound as of girls' voices. So peeping carefully, he saw many maids merrily bathing in the lake, and these were of the fairy race, who dwell in deep waters and dark caves, and keep away from mankind. And seeing their garments lying on the shore, and beholding among the damsels one whom he desired to obtain, Martin quietly slipped along unseen, as all of his species can do, till he had the clothes in his hands. For being tinctured with magic, and learned in the lore of all kind of goblins, elves, and witches, Master Martin knew that when naiads are not clothed, and a man has their garments, he holds them at his mercy. For in the apparel lies their fairy power. And if you doubt it, do but give it a try and see for yourself. Okay, so Martin comes to this lake where he sees a bunch of fairies bathing, and they don't have their clothes on, so he goes and grabs their clothes because I guess their clothes is where their magic is. So if he has their clothes, then he holds them at his mercy. And having done this, the merry fellow ran inland with a brave whoop, which the fairies hearing, they in a great rage ran after the ravisher of their robes. But she whom he desired outstripped the rest, and when she approached him, he did but tap her lightly on the head with a small stick, according to a certain ancient prescription followed in fairyland, which makes of a woman a wife. Whereupon she, according to the antique rite, being astonished to find herself so suddenly married, fainted dead away, and was carried off in peace. And as for the clothes of the others, the Martin gave them back without taking fee or rewards. Okay, so he runs away with their clothes. They all start chasing him, and there was one of the fairies that he wanted in particular, and so she catches up first, and when she gets there, he taps her on the head with a stick, and I guess that in fairyland, this is some ancient ritual that when someone taps you on the head with a stick, you become a wife. So she caught up to him to get her clothes. He taps her on the head with a stick, and she realizes, oh, I'm your wife now, and is so surprised that she faints. So he leaves all the other clothes there and then carries her off. Man, this is already a pretty interesting story, right? Then Team the Moose, who was a good soul, but not wise above all the world, coming home and finding Martin married, wished also for a wife. And having heard all the tale, he said, well, if it is no harder than that, 'tis as easy as sucking a honeysuckle, and I am as good as married. Okay. So he heard Martin's story, and he's like, wow, it's that easy to get a wife? I want one too. I'm going to go get one. And going to the pond in the mountains among the rocks and behind the grapevines, he too beheld the fairies jumping, flapping, splashing, and mischieving merrily like mad minxes in the water, Whereat he, being all of a rage, as it were, caught up the clothes of these poor maids and ran, she whom he most admired catching up with him. And being resolved to do the thing thoroughly, he grappled up a great club and gave her a bang on her small head, which stunned her indeed, and that forever, inasmuch as she was slain outright. So the moose remained unmarried. Geez, that got dark quick, but I'm laughing because it's so surprising that it got dark that quick. So in case you didn't catch what happens, Moose team is trying the same trick. He gets the clothes, runs away, and when the one he wants catches up, he's like, okay, I don't want to underdo it. I want to do this right. So he, instead of using a small stick, gets a big club and hits her over the head with it, and he hits her so hard that she dies. So no wife for Moose because he accidentally killed her. All right, man, this story does not disappoint, right? Now, Team was one of the kind not uncommon in this world, who hold that if any other man has or gets more than they have, then they are deeply wronged. And it had come to pass that Master Martin, finding that his wife yearned greatly for the society of her sisters, offered to take yet another of them in marriage, merely to oblige his wife. For in such a kind of benevolence, he was one of the best souls that ever lived. And rather than have trouble in the family, he would have wedded all the pretty girls in the country. Such a hardship. So going as before to the pond in the mountains, among the rocks and behind the grapevines, he, by the same device, captured yet another fairy, whom, taking home, he wedded. Okay, so Moose team doesn't get a wife. Martin, in the meantime, finds out that his wife is really missing her sisters, so he goes and gets another one and marries her too, so that she'll have some company. Very big of him. All right. Yet Team took this sadly to heart. So I think Team's going to be a little upset because now Martin has 2 wives and Team still has no wives. So Team willed that Martin should give him this last spouse, to which Martin would in no wise agree. Truly, Team argued earnestly that as he had no wife and no wisdom wherewith to win one, of course he must have one of Martin's, or that Martin should go and get him one. To which Martin replied that Moose might skin his own skunks and fish for his own minnows, and also paddle his own canoe to the devil if it so pleased him, all of these being approved sayings of high and racy antiquity. Whereupon Team sought to persuade Martin with a club, who gave a soft answer by shooting a flint-headed arrow through Team's scalp lock. And this friendship they continued for many days, passing their evenings in manufacturing missiles and the mornings in sending them at one another. Okay, so Team has told Martin, you have 2 wives, I have none. Give me your latest wife. And Martin's like, no, not going to do that. And so they start fighting. First, they're just insulting each other, and then it gets physical. They start trying to hurt one another. I think it's Team hits Martin with a club, and then Martin shoots an arrow at Team, and it's just going back and forth. Each night they're preparing for something that they're going to do to the other person the next day. Now the fairy water wives, not being accustomed to this kind of intimacy, sought to subtract themselves from it. So one morning, when Martin and Team were most industriously endeavoring to effect mutual murder, the 2 wives of the former fled afar to seek fortune, and succeeded therein to perfection. And it came to pass, when the sun had set, and the voice of Bumol, the spirit of night, was heard afar on high, and Nebauchset, the night walker, shone over all, that the 2 brides lay in an oak opening of the forest, and looked at Psesmuk, the stars, and talked about them even as children might do. And one said to the other, if those stars be men, which would you have for a husband? By my faith, replied the other, it should be that little red twinkling fellow, for I like the little stars best. And I, said the other, will wed the Wisowayu Psesm, the great yellow star, for I love the large stars. And saying this in jest, they fell asleep. You guys, how many of you are recognizing the beginning of a story we read recently? Okay, so before all this star stuff happened, the fairy wives are not liking that these 2 men are trying to kill each other, And so they decide to run away. And when they run away, one night they're looking up at the stars, and the one says, "Oh, if I had to marry one of these stars, I'd marry that twinkling red one." And then the other one says, "Oh, I would marry that yellow one because I like the big stars best." So we read a story, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but it was a story about these two women saying those exact things and then waking up to find themselves married and in the stars' home. So I have a feeling we're going to hear some repeating coming up. But many a word spoken in jest is recalled in earnest, as these brides learned when they awoke and found themselves married again at only a word. Man, these poor fairy women, right? They keep getting married on accident and they don't want to be. That's kind of messed up, right? Okay, and you know what? I think we're gonna end there for today, but I think a lot of us that have been watching these videos, you probably know what's coming up. But yeah, I can't help but feel for these poor fairy women who first get married because someone steals their clothes and then taps them on the head with a stick. And then when they run away from that husband, they get married because they're just talking about how pretty the stars are, and then they wake up married to one. That's not okay. All right, so that's just the very beginning part of this story we have with the very long title. But we also read the story of Glooscap kind of changing the geography by breaking the dam that the giant beavers made. And we also read the story about the men who sought Glooscap for their gifts, and the three got turned into trees, and the one got the medicine, but he didn't follow rules, so he doesn't get it. Which one did you guys like best of those stories? I think I'm liking this last story the best so far. It's got me laughing a bit because some of the parts are pretty ridiculous. And I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm sure that we'll hear that same star bride story that we heard a few weeks ago. But then we've also been promised the Great Indian Devils. So I'm excited to hear about that next week. But I hope you guys are staying safe and staying happy and not too bored, finding fun things to do and busy things to keep you entertained. So I will see you guys again next week for some more videos. Stay safe, guys.